Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and we'll be looking at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 4. But before we begin, our theme verse for Lunch with the Lord, Jeremiah 15:16. Thy words were found, and I did eat them. And thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now he says here in verse 4, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, and that fadeth not away, reserved in heaven for you. The new birth that we have had has caused us to have a right now living hope. And that living hope is a looking forward unto something that we will receive. And it's an inheritance from God. So the living hope that we have from God has caused us to look forward unto an inheritance from God that we will receive. And because we have become members of a heavenly family with a heavenly Father, then we are partakers of a heavenly inheritance. And this inheritance was only made possible because Jesus Christ rose from among the dead. Okay? He rose from the dead. So this is what we're looking at. Remember, verses 3, 4, and 5 deal with the inheritance of the saints. Now, the first inheritance that these Jewish readers would be reminded of that God gave to them would be God's promise to Abraham of the land of Israel. Now, when we go back to Genesis chapter 12, and in Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, he says here, and the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. Now, chapter 13, Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 through 18 say, and the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. And this is God's promise. And remember, 1 Peter was written to Jewish believers who were experiencing great suffering. And these Jewish believers would understand that when we're talking about an inheritance, the first inheritance that these Jewish believers would be reminded of would be the inheritance that God gave to Abraham for his children, for the nation that God would raise up through Abraham. So the inheritance that God gave to Abraham would be part of that, what the Jews would be looking forward to. But the inheritance that God gave to Abraham and to his seed was only a type. It was only a picture of our heavenly inheritance. Okay? Abraham's inheritance was an earthly inheritance. It was infected with sin, and it was surrounded by enemies. And the earthly inheritance was never intended to be permanent or forever. Okay? And that's what we have to realize, is that the inheritance God gave Abraham was just a picture of what God is going to give to the believer in the end of time, the inheritance of a new Jerusalem, of a new world, of a new glorified body. God is the earthly inheritance God gave to Abraham was just a picture of what we would receive from God. Okay? Peter tells these Jewish believers and also to us that God has a permanent final inheritance which we look forward to. And a lot of the things that were written in the Old Testament are types of spiritual things. And the inheritance was one of them. And we look forward to our spiritual inheritance, our permanent inheritance, not a temporal one like Abraham got that was infected with sin, that had enemies in it and around it, an inheritance that the children of Israel had to actually conquer. God gave them the land, but it was filled with the enemies, and they had to go in and conquer their inherited land. And we don't have to conquer our heavenly inheritance. It's already there. And so this is why Abraham's inheritance was a type of our spiritual inheritance, which we'll receive at the end of time. Now, there are 4 qualities that describe this inheritance. And Peter here, he says, to an inheritance incorruptible. And this Greek word for incorruptible is aphthartos. And it means not able to be corrupted or decayed. So this Greek word aphthartos means that nothing from the outside of this inheritance can infect the inheritance, okay? Not sin, deceit, lies, murders, anger, hatred, nothing from this sinful world or our sinful nature can corrupt our inheritance. So the first description of our inheritance is that nothing from outside the inheritance can corrupt it. All right? Secondly, he says incorruptible and undefiled. Now, undefiled, the Greek word is amiantos, and it means free from any kind of contamination. So now, Peter says that our inheritance, there's nothing from the outside that can corrupt it. Now Peter is saying that there's nothing inside the inheritance that can contaminate it. As Jesus Christ himself is undefiled and pure within, as we see in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 26, Jesus Christ is pure within. So also, the inheritance is pure. It is without sin or without any kind of fault or deceit. So our inheritance is incorruptible from the outside. It is undefiled from inside. And then he says, and that fadeth not away. Now, this Greek word for fadeth not away is amarantos, and it means to die out, to wear out, to waste away. When Adam and Eve sinned, they set into motion something that is totally inconquerable. It cannot be defeated or controlled no matter how many bullets or atomic weapons you fire at it. When Adam and Eve sinned, they set something into motion that is absolutely inconquerable by us, at least by us, by mankind. It is not conquerable. This unconquerable thing can and will be defeated at the last day. And what is this thing that defeats every single person on earth? This thing shows no mercy whatsoever. And it is absolutely not a respecter of person. What is this thing that is inconquerable, shows no mercy, is not a respecter of person at all? What is it? You know what it is? It's time. It's time. Time shows no mercy. Time does not respect any person's amount of money they have, does not respect any prestige of that person. Time means nothing. It is absolutely inconquerable by man. Everything in this world system grows old. It wears out and it dies. But the inheritance which we have been born into, which you and I have been rebirthed into from above, is in no way affected by time. It will never wear down or wear out or fade away. It is completely unaffected by sin or the effects of sin or of time. So this inheritance that we have, and this is something that we can rest in. We've never known, you and I have never known a time without time. We've never known what it's like to be in an existence outside of time, where time does not matter. You may say, well, I've experienced times in my life where I was like on vacation, or I was in a time in my life where it just didn't seem like time meant anything. Well, that's okay. I understand. We all have had those experiences where we're on vacation, or maybe you're driving somewhere and you see a beautiful scenery and you just stop and you take time to enjoy the scenery. And all of a sudden you look at your watch and you say, oh, I've been here for 30 minutes already? Where did time go? And you think to yourself, well, time just seemed to not exist. But in reality, it did exist, and it always has existed. Ever since the time Adam and Eve sinned, that's when time began. But there's coming a time when time will be no more. And it's very difficult for any human being to imagine an existence outside of time, where nothing grows old, where nothing decays. And yet, in our hearts as Christians, we long for that time. We long for that existence, because it's what we were created for from the very beginning. God never intended this earth to become like this, to where things wear down, where things die, where things just wear out and go away and die out. And we long inside of our being for that time where we can enter into that existence where there is no time, where nothing wears out, where everything is, I don't want to say everything is the same because it's not boring, but where everything just is. And it's just for all of eternity, everything just is. And it's hard to describe. No one can truly understand it because we've never experienced it. But time is one of our, not only sin, yes, sin is one of our worst enemies, but time also is an enemy that we have here on this earth. But time does not affect our inheritance in heaven. And then he says here, reserved in heaven for you. And this Greek word for reserved is tereo. Beautiful Greek word, tereo. And it's in the perfect tense. and it's in the passive voice. And our inheritance is reserved. Reserved means to guard. It means to keep, to watch over, or to protect. So tereo, it's in the perfect tense, and it means that the action of our inheritance being protected and guarded was completed in the past, and it has present, continuous, ongoing results forever. Perfect tense means that our inheritance in the past has been reserved. It already has been reserved, and the results of that being reserved are continuing forever, even till now and tomorrow and next week and on into eternity for all the existence of this earth. Our inheritance is being reserved. Passive voice, this is why I keep saying, is being, because it's passive voice, meaning that the inheritance has received the action of being guarded and watched over and protected. So God created the inheritance, the heaven, what we are to inherit. God has created the inheritance, and now the inheritance is receiving the action of being reserved, being protected. It's not producing. The inheritance isn't protecting itself. That would be active voice. This is passive voice, meaning the inheritance is being reserved by someone else, something else. And who is it that's producing the action of protecting our inheritance? Obviously, it's God. God is protecting our inheritance. And God is the one who is continually, forever and ever, he is guarding and watching and protecting over our inheritance. It's a beautiful thing. This verse here, that our inheritance is incorruptible. Cannot be corrupted from the outside, right? It is undefiled from within. It doesn't fade away. In no way can time affect our inheritance. And it is reserved. God is protecting it. He's guarding it. He's watching over that inheritance forever and ever and ever. It does not grow old. And God is protecting the inheritance from any kind of corruption, inside, outside. It is a pure inheritance that we are looking forward to. And God is watching it and guarding it over for us until the day that you and I go to be there and to actually enter into that inheritance from God. And not only from God, but with God too. All right? Until next lesson, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.